Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening from wherever you are. Thank you so much for joining us today for a LinkedIn Live on enabling a sustainable future and talking a little bit about science collaboration with One Tree Planted, an initiative for reforesting Mount Everest, and much more. Well, today is Earth Day, and it's a powerful reminder that we have not inherited this planet from our ancestors, but rather borrowed it from our future generation. We all know March 2024 has been the hottest month since 1880. We also know every year 8 million tons of plastic is being dumped in our oceans. CO2 emissions are at all-time high. We are depleting our own Mother Earth every year. Clearly, the Mother Earth doesn't need us, but we need her. And it's our collective responsibility as citizens of this planet, as individuals, communities, and organizations to preserve it and nurture it for our future generations. And at Cyient, we have taken one such humble effort in partnering with One Tree Planted, a front runner in global reforestation efforts. Today, we are focusing on the reforestation of Mount Everest area in Nepal, where we are not just planting trees, but also collaborating with the Sherpa community towards preservation of biological as well as cultural ecosystem. Please join me in welcoming KM from One Tree Planted. Without much further ado, KM, welcome to the session. KM is a key project manager at the One Tree Planted who has been instrumental in pioneering many efforts towards global reforestation. She brings in a wealth of experience and insight into the environmental conservation, and backed by notable contribution and recognition, her work has also been featured in National Geographic. It's a pleasure to have you with us, KM, and discuss about this initiative. We are really proud about our humble initiative and partnership with you. And welcome to the session once again. I'm sure the audience will be curious to hear about the project, the goals, and a little bit about yourself. Over to you.
Hi, thank you so much for having me today. We're so thrilled at One Tree Planted to be partnered with Cyient on this very special day and throughout this project. And I just want to say that the project is not at all humble. We're looking at one of the most important ecosystems on the planet and the highest peak of Mother Earth. So I would venture to say that it's not humble at all. It's so ambitious, and we're so proud to be partnered with you for this. I'm just going to take a moment to present a very quick deck, just to give you a little taste of what the project is about. Just give me one moment, sorry. Ooh, it's not working. Here we go. Hi. Okay. So,
okay.
Can you see it here?
Yeah.
Perfect.
We can see it.
So yeah, just very quickly, I thought I'd introduce myself. So as you mentioned, I'm KM Reyes. I'm project manager of the Asia Pacific at One Tree Planted. I'm dialing in from Sydney, Australia today. So I'm an Australian Filipina frontline forest conservationist. I'm also a National Geographic explorer. I also represent One Tree Planted at the United Nations Conventions on Climate Change and Biodiversity. So really lobbying with decision makers at that higher level about what we can do moving forward, not just on Earth Day, but every day, to face these crises that are challenging us now. My background is political sciences, environmental management, and community organizing. And I'm also the co-founder of a very small frontline rainforest conservation organization in the Philippines called Center for Sustainability PH. So I have both field experience as well as a lot of kind of higher level policy and management experience. Specifically at One Tree Planted, as I mentioned, I manage the Asia Pacific portfolio, and it's quite a big geography. I think all of us who are here today understand just how rich and diverse the Asia Pacific is. So the geography and portfolio that I manage is from the United Arab Emirates all the way across to China and then down to Australia. So it includes South and Southeast Asia. And my primary role at One Tree Planted is to source quality tree planting projects, manage relationships with our on-ground partners, which you're going to see today in pictures, conduct field validation, so getting down on the ground like you're seeing in this picture here, making sure that the projects that we're supporting, including the contributions of Cyient, are really happening on the ground and are providing that quality change that we want to see. And then, as I said, at the UN, as well as also overseeing our global Indigenous peoples and local communities project engagement. So this is something that's very, very close to my heart, working with frontline Indigenous peoples and local communities. And this specific project in Mount Everest is just the epitome of that. So I'm so thrilled to be here today, celebrating Earth Day with you to talk about and showcase this project. So very briefly, this is the project that we're talking about today. It's Mount Everest Community Restoration, happening this year. And it's very ambitious. As I said, we're planting 7,500 native trees, seedlings sourced from the surrounding reference landscapes of Mount Everest. And these are the degraded lands of Sagarmatha, better known as Mount Everest National Park. And we're planting at 4,000 meters above sea level. So I'm not sure how many of you have done a lot of hiking or mountaineering, but I know for me, having grown up at sea level, just walking at 4,000 meters, I've done some hiking, and I couldn't breathe. So it's a really ambitious project, and we're working with some incredible frontline communities. So what's so special about this project is that it's Indigenous led. So it's a project that comes from Indigenous Sherpa communities, and it goes back directly to Indigenous Sherpa. It's a tiny Indigenous group that we have on ground, 2 full-time staff only. And we've been counting on engage with local communities since 2002 in Mount Everest. Previous plantation projects were a 95% survival, which is just fantastic work considering how hard these terrains are. And this group is really important also because it sits on the management board of the Sagarmatha National Park. So it's not just about the frontline work, but also that policy and government work that really drives projects forward and ensures sustainability. So these are just some very quick grabs of some of the incredible work that our mothers, women, and also children are doing. And then just some of the incredible sacred sites that are also being protected and restored, and just the work that's involved with fencing and making sure that the planting sites are really well protected.
Wow, that's pretty inspiring, Kim. And while we were researching for our partners, I also came across this fact that the entire One Tree Planted organization has planted more than 100 million trees in 82 countries. Frankly, this is so inspiring and this is so heartening, right? And I'm really, really hoping that our initiative and efforts of reforestation of 7,500 trees really makes the additional impact required. I must say, okay, I'm also proud to share that, while this is one initiative, but at Cyient, we have also invested in planting more than 80,000 saplings over the last 5 years in and around the communities that we operate in, right? And pretty much with a survival rate of around 85 to 86%, right? I think every effort counts is what I'm hearing from you, right? Every effort, every minute counts. This gets me curious, right? What got you inspired and excited about this whole mission?
Okay, I'm going to answer that question, but before that, I want to jump on some of the brilliant things that you've said because I think they're really important. Firstly, I do want to highlight that yes, One Tree Planted was part of this incredible initiative to plant 100 million trees globally, as you mentioned. And what's so incredible about it, even for myself at One Tree Planted, is that this was accomplished in 10 years. And it couldn't have been done without incredible partners like Cyient. I just want to it's not at all just One Tree Planted. We are a group, we are a global community that are working together across the globe to really make this happen. So I just want to highlight that whether it's 7,500 trees and many, many of them, this is what's made 100 million trees after 10 years. So it's really every small step becomes this giant leap over a decade of work. And I also want to highlight that I don't know how many trees you've planted personally or how many those in the audience have planted, but also 80,000 trees is a lot of trees. I think the maximum that I've done, over a season is like 1,000 trees, and it's
Yeah.
digging holes, carrying the seedlings, patting down all the soil. It's such a mammoth effort. So yeah, as you've highlighted, every tree counts. And with survival as well, I think also what's really important to highlight is that sometimes it's not just about how many trees survive, but how many, the actual landscapes that are transformed. So even if not all the trees survive, there's enough trees there to completely transform the canopy cover, bring back all of the animals and the wildlife and so on. So anyway, I'm going to go back to your question. So as I think you can tell anyway, I'm very passionate about this work. But I guess for me specifically, and this actually ties back into this project in Nepal, as I mentioned before, my background was in political sciences. I was working in human rights, actually, really focused on youth and women's rights. I was working in communities that were in very vulnerable areas. I was working in many slum communities, and I was very passionate about this work. I thought that human rights was the most important thing that we have to focus on. And it was during this time that I was living and working in a slum. I was in Brazil at the time, in one of the favelas, and the communities there are constructed in some of the steepest areas where nobody wants to live. And I was very passionate about this work. And then one night while I was asleep, we were asleep, my community, we heard a giant landslide happen just on the other side of the same community. And out of sheer luck, I was housed on the other side, but of the same mountain. And I woke up the next morning. Obviously, there was a lot of disaster that we had to deal with. But something that, that was a light bulb moment for me. I didn't actually understand what a landslide was. How does this happen? And then I realized, okay, you have soil instability and you have, watersheds that are destroyed and so on and so forth. And it was from that moment that I realized that we don't have human rights if we don't have environmental rights, if we don't have rights to safe terrain, to housing that is on safe terrain, to access to clean water, to fresh air. And that's where I made the switch. And I haven't looked back.
Wow, that's definitely inspirational, and I guess I really hope that all of us and the people in the audience don't have to wait for a stark moment like that to be inspired, right? As you said, every day is Earth Day. We should not wait for one day in a year to initiate or celebrate or cultivate our habits. This brings me to the second question, KM, that when we look at the entire Mount Everest reforestation project, what's the ultimate project goals and strategy, right? Some of us who've been part of this, we would love to know what's the end mission here, right? And most of these projects are not just about planting trees, right? It's actually about impacting the climate change. It's about influencing and preserving the ecosystem, as you said, about one of the key wonders of the planet. Can you throw some more light on that?
Yeah, for sure. Specifically with this project in Nepal, as you mentioned, it's so much more than just planting trees. And specifically for this Indigenous community, a key part of it is showing how science and spirituality can work together to protect the environment and also cultural values. So it's not just about, as I was saying before, that it's not just about human rights. It's about how we connect with Mother Earth and how Mother Earth supports us and vice versa. And so in terms of, on the very kind of summary level, the specific goal is obviously to plant 7,500 trees, get those trees in the ground, get them well planted in areas that they have a good chance to survive, while also, confronting these issues around land degradation, issues with landslides, issues with watersheds. One thing that the communities that we're working with in Nepal have highlighted as well is that, as we know, the glaciers are melting in Mount Everest. These are some of the most, I cannot highlight enough, these are some of the most vulnerable landscapes to climate change, and also the knock-on effect of these glaciers. The Himalayas is a watershed for so many more countries beyond Nepal, right? As I think many of us are familiar. I know that for me, I manage projects that go all the way to Thailand that are affected by the Himalayas. And so what this project is doing, the reason why it's so ambitious is because it's not just about looking at what they're doing in their immediate neighborhood to, renew their specific sacred sites around monasteries, around hermitages, around caves, as well as protect the land that they depend on, not just for livelihood, but agriculture, for water source, for fuel wood in these extreme conditions, as well as trekking. This is obviously Mount Everest. Just base camp is one of the most visited places globally for mountaineers. For me personally, as a mountain climber, it's Mecca. It's an incredible place. And so what the community is doing is really trying to look at this environmental piece, this community piece. And I think what's also really exciting about that is this idea that they're also a part of the management board of the Mount Everest National Park, that they see that the work that they're doing cuts through policy as well as the frontline work, as well as that community engagement. And it's only by looking at all three ways of what's happening immediately and what we're doing in the future that it can be really a sustainable project.
Right. And how does this contribute to the larger agenda that you mentioned, right? That it's also part of the whole UN agenda, right? Where we want to make a global impact, right? This is one, as you mentioned, it's one such ambitious project. But if you can also give a little bit of big picture view on how does this matter in the overall UN SDG goals, right? That'll be great.
Yeah, for sure. So I think we've all heard, for those of us in the space around the UN Climate Convention, that we're trying to keep the temperature below 1.5 degrees. And it's these glacier spots that are critical for making that happen. So what this group specifically, what we're working on together right now in Nepal, is really trying to maintain that climate temperature down to this, to 1.5 degrees. And the thing also that we need to think about is when glaciers retreat, the number of available freshwater changes, hillsides are damaged. It makes everything more susceptible to erosion, to dehydration. Even the most minor changes, can completely transform the landscape. And I think specifically with the UN Climate Convention and what we're working on there's so many, there's many goals. I think we're very familiar with many of the SDG goals. Another one that is not getting so much attention yet, but is critical for this, is together with, because what we're facing right now is a climate and biodiversity crisis, right? These are two interlinked crises that if we don't have healthy biodiversity, we also do not have a stable climate. And so what's happening here now at the Biodiversity Convention specifically is we're trying to also, there's a global target now that India has also signed on to, and many countries across the globe, which is to protect 30% of land and water by 2030. And to protect 30% of land and water by 2030, we need to start by restoring landscapes. So we need to make sure that many of the degraded landscapes are protected and restored. And so we're looking at two major global goals here, this 1.5 degrees as well as this 30 by 30, that this project is directly feeding into. And because of how special this landscape is, it just makes it so much more important, and it makes it a reference landscape for other communities to look at as an example of what happens when we have extreme degradation or we have extreme climate or biodiversity challenges. Does that answer your question?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I think that's where I was coming to. I was reading that despite all our efforts, the temperature change that we have seen this year is still not at all in the range. And between 1982 and today, the over the decade temperature has been risen the highest than it has ever been in the last few centuries. So clearly the imperative or the goal in front of us is humongous, right? Um, and while you talked a lot about the biodiversity agenda that's being met here through this landscape, how does this, or for that matter, any other big project of One Tree Planted that you would like to talk about towards the whole carbon emission or the plastic pollution agenda? Do you want to throw any experience or any light on that, or any key takeaways for the audience?
Yeah, for sure. So at One Tree Planted, we're very lucky. We, together with partners like Cyient, were able to support really small projects like this one
Mhm.
that have a huge impact on very vulnerable ecosystems. And then we
Mhm.
also have other projects that are planting millions of trees
Right.
across, across many, many hectares. And with that, what that means is that when you're looking at landscapes that are this wide, you're also covering landscapes that often are directly impacted by pollution, and specifically
Mhm.
plastic pollution, which is this third planetary crisis that we're hearing a lot more about
Yeah.
at the UN level also. So climate, biodiversity, and plastic pollution. And so
Got
something that we're really excited about at One Tree Planted, and we also actually encourage Cyient to join if the team is ever interested, is we do these incredible planting events and on-ground community events where we engage, staff from teams to come in, plant trees, do habitat restoration, as well as
it.
do trash cleanups. And I don't actually have the metrics myself because I don't manage these projects, but I know that every year we work with different companies across the globe who are doing these. And I think maybe last year we might have done about 50 to 100 or maybe more. I'm
Wow.
thinking maybe even 200. And so what this means for us at One Tree Planted is that it is so much more than planting trees. It's just,
Yeah.
planting trees is just one part of this bigger shift that we're looking at, in order to face these challenges. And I think also that something that is so exciting about our partnership with Cyient, and I know for me personally, as someone who's been working in the space for a really long time, is that it's not just about, giving one day of work or one day of volunteer work or providing a donation or providing financial help. What's actually so special about these partnerships is that we really do need all hands on deck for across all disciplines to overcome these environmental crises. So, for example, we know that Cyient is working across engineering, manufacturing, data and analytics, and so on and so forth. It's about making all of these steps in our systems sustainable.
True.
And that's what's so exciting about having these opportunities to talk to your audiences. Because, I'm always saying to people, it's not just about planting trees, but it's about making it sustainable, in your everyday, whether it's at home or, in your job. Because we need experts across the board. We're not going to be
Yeah.
able to overcome this without
Yeah.
all expertise. I know that I don't come from an engineering degree at all, and I have lots of engineering problems to deal with every day with planting and, with these extreme landscapes that we're trying to restore. So, yeah.
That's really interesting, and I think that also gives us maybe a takeaway and an action, right? How can we provide maybe engineering expertise in some of these initiatives? You talked about multiple disciplines and stakeholders, KM, right? How do government institutions offer the support, right? What kind of collaboration are you doing currently with the government entities, or for that matter, academia institutions?
Yeah, so as I said, and as you've highlighted, it's obviously something that works across all disciplines. Obviously, with my background in political sciences, I'm a firm believer in government policy being a key part of the work
Mhm.
that encourages and ensures that this work is sustainable. But it's also
Mhm.
a lot of push and pull. It's about community-based organizations, charities, private entities, multinationals, pushing and pulling these levers with government. But absolutely, government is a key part of of making this work, sustainable. And we're also at a level now, I believe, with the challenges that we face, that it's not enough anymore. It's a huge part that all of us do our bit, but it's
True.
also extremely important that we are engaging with government, and that government is listening to us, and transforming policy. Because, I think that, I'm sure that Cyient understands this, you're mobilizing huge resources, huge amounts of human resources, in towards reaching a goal. And there's no one better position to do that and create those policies and those frameworks and those regulations like government is. So, but I'm very pleased as well to mention that, as I said, as you know, I'm very active at the convention level, and the private sector is coming out and representing in a way that they never have before. And it's so exciting to see, because governments are really seeing now that, oh, okay, the private sector is realizing how important this is. Yeah. And so, I've seen some incredible interventions from the private sector, just saying, governments, you need to pull your finger out, and government's listening, so yeah, it's an ongoing dialogue, and we all have a part to play.
Right, right. And, I'm so glad you said that, it's not just about planting trees, right? Sustainability is much more than that. It's about preserving the ecosystem. It's about nurturing the planet, right? Which can cut across multiple disciplines and multiple activities, and I'm glad to share, KM, that, when we talked about the agenda of plastic pollution, we at Cyient have pretty much tried to remove all single-use plastic from our offices around the globe. And yeah, I know, right? It
That's so
was,
exciting.
and it's got less to do with plastic, but more to do with just convincing ourselves that this is so important, and this small step plays a big role. Similarly, we have also participated this year for the second year in the Dow Jones Sustainability Index to benchmark our business sustainable business practices. So that's a humble move again towards that. And when you talked about the ecosystem, right, and marrying our engineering services to make an impact on the global sustainability agenda, I'm proud to share that we actually offered engineering services to the city of Oslo towards its carbon capture and storage project. And we designed a solution to help the Oslo city capture 400,000 tons of CO2 annually. And if that goes live, I think that's a huge impact that we could make on a city. Similarly, the maritime ecosystem is as precious, KM, right? As precious are the mountains. And we have been an active member of the Ocean Highway Cluster, which basically promotes hydrogen, ammonia, and LOHC. So we are also working towards the alternate energy agenda, right? Because the fossil fuels are definitely adding a lot to the entire CO2 emission. And as a part of our entire multi-year partnership with another organization called Hyon, which is focusing on energy transition for maritime sector, right? And part of our effort was to enhance the feasibility of hydrogen to be used as an alternate fuel. I think these are some of those initiatives, came to your point, where how do we apply our engineering expertise, right, to solve the sustainability problems that matter, right? And our entire purpose statement is all about applying imaginations to solve problems that matter. And it's whether we partner with One Tree Planted to plant 7,500 trees and make the Mount Everest greener, or preserve the maritime ecosystem, right, or work with the city of Oslo, right? I think they all matter. And today, being Earth Day, it's a very stark reminder for all of us, right? That, as you mentioned, that while the private sector is contributing, I think we as individuals, as community members, are equally responsible for everyday sustainability, right? So I'm so glad that we did this discussion, and I'm proud to be partnering with One Tree Planted, and hear from you about your inspiration. We have just 30 seconds left, KM, in the session, but I would love to hear from you. What are your top three takeaways for audience who wants to contribute towards sustainability but don't know how?
So the first thing I always say to people is plant a tree in your own backyard, and please keep it alive. That's number one, the first thing. The second is partnerships. We cannot do this alone. We are absolutely, the only way we're going to move forward is by doing it as a team. And thirdly, oh my gosh, I had something for thirdly and now I've already forgotten. But for thirdly, think positive. Honestly, it's the only way is up. I think it's really easy to be down and out, especially when we're looking at statistics and everything. But think positively and think creatively about how you can be a part of the change in whatever discipline you are. So,
Wow,
yeah.
wow. I'm so glad. And, I must say that I'm definitely a passioneer when it comes to planting a tree in your backyard. I have a small apartment and I have around 250 plants that I maintain and nurture on my own. That's for another conversation. But thank you so much, KM, and thank you so much, everyone who has joined this LinkedIn Live. Really appreciate your time, and let's continue to design a sustainable tomorrow together. Wish you all a very happy Earth Day.
Thank you.
Thank you.